Welcome back, everybody, to His Heartbeat. And it's just great to be back with everybody again. Hope you all are having a good day. I certainly am, and I'm even better now because I have Stacey here, Stacey Womack. I hope I said that right. So, welcome, Stacey, to our show.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit about where you are and a little bit about yourself before we dive into the show.
Sure. Well, I'm a born and raised Oregonian, and our national office is here in Oregon. And I grew up, uh, uh, in the church, and my father's a pastor. I met
Hmm.
my husband really young, and we got married young, and I started having babies. So I have six grown children and
Oh,
my
wow.
13th grandchild on the way. And I have my first great grandson that was born in November of this last year. So anyway, life is full. We're busy, and God, is just doing great things.
That's awesome. You look young. You've been busy, busy woman. Yeah, so how long have you been involved? Stacy's involved in a ministry she started, Abuse Recovery Ministry Services. So how long have you been doing that?
So it's a little bit more than 27 and a half years. So I'm working towards my 28th year
Oh, well,
of doing
great.
this work. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So that's not your background you had told me earlier. So I'm curious what got you interested in this?
Well, when I had my children, I always joke that it's funny that God gave me six children because I didn't even like babysitting.
Okay.
And then, we had these children, whether or not I was using birth control or not, God just kept giving them to us. And I started homeschooling them back in the day when that was a really new thing. I just knew God
Mm,
had called me to that, and that really
okay,
was my ministry. But
of
in the
course.
midst of that, as I was probably more than halfway through it, of homeschooling the kids, God began to speak to me about ministry beyond my family. And he told me, I had been blessed to have all these years to have been poured into, and it was my turn to pour out. So I
It's
spent a
cool.
couple of years seeking him about what it was he wanted me to do. I think I had my own ideas of, I didn't really know what it was, but I just knew that it would involve some speaking, and I thought I'd be doing something I knew something about, maybe something happy. And God is so great in how he begins to speak to us. I have a really crazy story I don't have time to go into, but basically, he called me into this ministry. But before he did, he said, "You don't get to pick the ministry, I do." He goes, "A lot of people ask for ministry, and then somebody asks them to help in the nursery, and they go, 'Oh, no, no, I'm sure that's not what God is calling me to do.'" And God pointed out that if you do something because it makes you feel good or look good, that's selfish ambition.
Mm,
It's very clear I didn't get to pick the ministry. So this is the door that opened through a lot of circumstances, but this is the door that opened. And I stepped through in obedience, knowing no more than the average person about abuse at the time. And honestly, at the time, I had no intentions of starting a nonprofit. I was just going to figure out how to lead a couple of groups of women through their healing process, and that was it. And God had much bigger plans than that. And now we're national and international with our women's recovery program that's called Her Journey, which is a free
okay.
program where women can join at any time and just find God's healing. There's 15 lessons that we rotate through, but we lead it year round.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
yeah, we have it translated into Spanish, Russian, German, Kiswahili, and just recently Polish.
Awesome. That's great. So when you first felt God was calling you to this, what was the next step you did to get going?
Well, gosh, I knew nothing about doing this, so it was like, figuring out how to get a little funding. And I was just working out of my home, and I was homeschooling all six of my kids that year. It was my first year doing that. And my oldest was going to be graduating early. So it was my only year I had all six kids. And actually, we did a couple luncheons. We did three luncheons that first year. And I complained every single month to God. And I asked God every single month if I could quit. And
Mm,
God kept telling me no. And so I did some phone support to the women who were coming to these little tiny luncheons where half the people were the help, They weren't actually women who needed these services, but I needed God's confirmation. So after a year, I asked God to confirm, and He did. I had a couple women call it day, and just it was confirmation that I was where He wanted me to be. And then from there, then things really began to take off. And we
Yeah.
incorporated in June of 1999 and got our nonprofit status 3 months later, which is most pretty much unheard of
Yeah,
to
that
get it
is
that
good.
quickly.
Yeah.
From there, we were quadrupling the number of leaders we were training and locations we were having every year for a time.
So how did you equip yourself to know how to put this program together? I mean, you're not even from that background. Did you talk
No.
with people from that? Did you read books? What did you do?
Well, I did read books, and I also there was another Christian organization that I had some conversations with who didn't have anything that was really reproducible at the time. And I'm very much administrator, so I try to figure out how to get it from point A to point B. So after that, probably about 15 months, God was like, it's time to start a class. And I'm like, what do I do? So I was also beginning to connect with the domestic violence community as a whole, the larger domestic violence
Okay.
community. And so I sat down with a group of women, most of who were survivors, but I had pastors, I had nurses, I had just stay-at-home moms like myself. And we sat down, we took a retreat, and we decided how long we wanted the program to be, what topics we wanted to cover, what quotes, what scriptures we wanted to use. And then I sat down and wrote, which is crazy because I really wasn't even a reader at the time. And then we rewrote and rewrote and rewrote. And even though I haven't been through abuse, this is the thing, Sue, is that even though I hadn't been through abuse, I've been through hard things, and God taught me a lot through those
Mm,
hard things. And God's healing is very similar regardless of how the pain comes to you. But I
okay.
mean, we did specialize this towards women who experience abuse, but there's a lot of healing principles that work across the board. So that first year, like you said, I had all these women coming up saying, "How can you do this when you haven't experienced this?" Over
Mm,
and over and over and over again. And I remember I really struggled that first year. And then I was reading an article that Joyce Myers had written, and she made a comment that she goes, "Well, if I hadn't gone through, I went through, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today." And I said, "God, there it is again. What do I do?" And what God said to me is, "Stacey, Jesus served everyone, but he didn't experience everything."
yeah. Yeah.
And I had a pastor say to me,
That's good.
"I think it's really good that God has called you to this because you're able to speak to what health looks like." Right now, my
Mm,
husband and I are just a few months away from our 45th wedding anniversary. So,
awesome. Yeah.
we've had our highs and lows in our marriage, and we get that, and how hard it is, how hard relationships are. But it's that's been a part of what's helped me to do what I do.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, tell us more about her journey. So the ARMS, Abuse Recovery Ministry Service, is just the name of the organization, but then the program, is that it, is called Her Journey?
Right. Her Journey is our largest program, and
Okay.
it's all volunteer led. So we have online training now for that so that everybody can train from all over the world. So,
Uh-huh.
because we are in multiple countries right now, I think we're in 5 countries. Um, and it's a step-by-step process, but we have found that we don't want to we don't want to wait till the women have to wait to the first class. I'm not saying that very well. I apologize. There's a lot of programs out there that women have to sign up for and have to
Mm-hmm.
wait first class starts again, and they have to pay fees. With us, you could start today if you wanted to.
Okay.
So we're very trauma informed. The women don't have to do an intake with us. They can just call in. They don't even have to give us their real name. They can bring a female friend with them to group. Uh, they don't have to speak in the group. It's not set up to be a process group where everybody talks about the hard things, difficult things they went through. Uh, as much as it is more of a learning and understanding God's heart around this issue. So we have different topics. Like we have a kind of a domestic violence 101 where we talk about the types of abuse, cycle of abuse. But then we go into much more things like uh, dealing with depression, renewing of your mind, how to set boundaries,
Okay.
uh, anger, how that can be used appropriately, how it can be used inappropriately, uh, the difference between submission and oppression, which is really important for women of faith. They need to understand
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
It's been so misused, and abuse really means the misuse of. So that's what we see is, even in the faith community, the misuse of what God meant to be a good thing has been misused for bad things. So, and then towards some of the latter lessons, we get into like, how to begin to dream again and a prevention plan to keep yourself from falling back into old patterns. So each class is a little bit different, but it's mostly just teaching. And then at the end, we've done half the group like taking prayer requests where the women can kind of share what's going on in their lives. But it's always for a positive reason so that we can see God answer prayers. And that's probably as important as the lesson itself because we do see God answer prayers. And I just think that it's such a safe place. We have so many counselors that love sending their women to us because of the trauma informed approach that we use that God designed before we even knew what trauma informed actually meant.
Mm,
And it's just such a safe place. The women don't have to share if they don't want to, but I've had women come from other groups where the women were all rehashing the past in group, and it would kick up their PTSD, and they'd go home and have nightmares.
oh,
So this doesn't happen in our group because it creates safety for the women
mm,
in a place where it's all this positive new way of thinking, understanding God from a heart place, that not just knowing that God loves you and you have value, but believing it. Because when you believe it, you make different choices. And we've
right.
watched women do this thousands. We serve probably 50,000 women. And that's the ones we know of because I know I have a few rogue groups going out there that haven't stayed connected with us. But as long as people are getting help, God, that's all that matters. I'm just responsible to do what God has called me to do. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great program, and I tell you, I feel like God speaks to me every time I go through it. Our leaders say the same thing. I get to, I look at what lesson it is that night, and of course it's that lesson because whatever I'm going through also correlates, with what we're speaking to in this lesson. And so we have women who've been leading for 2 decades, which is unheard of in the domestic violence community because it's such a tough topic.
Mm,
But because there's so much hope and we see the women change right before our very eyes, it makes us want to keep coming back and doing it. It's such an
that's good.
incredible thing. Yeah.
That's great. So
Yeah.
are the groups are both live and online? Is that right? Do you have
We
online?
do. We do. We want to be in every county in every state. So we're looking for more leaders who want to train. So I just want to put that out there. But if there isn't a program in the area that the woman is in, or because of health issues or child care issues or whatever they need to do online, we have every day of the week covered except for Sunday at this point, and usually a couple a day actually to choose from. Trying to make sure that across the United States, regardless of their time zone, there's some groups that will work for them.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely have that as this worked well. I don't think online is as good, but because you don't get the same camaraderie that you would get in a group
Yeah.
when you're sitting with them, but it still works. And
Yeah.
then women still find healing. But I would always vote for an in-person group over a virtual, even though I know it's convenient,
Yeah.
and it feels probably safer for some women. Um, but I think that just being around other women, understanding you're not alone. There's
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of women suffering this.
Yeah. So do you have time? I'm assuming you said it builds camaraderie where some women they would share their story or they would be saying this happened this week or whatever.
Yeah. So during the second half of the class where we're taking prayer requests, the women will share what's going on in their lives, usually right then and there.
Mm,
Uh, we encourage them to go to one-on-one counseling to really walk through the trauma of the individuals situations
Okay.
that they face, but
Okay.
they aren't it's they aren't doing what we call treading water in our groups. So when they share, there's a reason for change. We've taken over groups that were led that way, where it was just a talk group and they just had books they were going through. And the women would stay for like 3 years. They had the camaraderie, but they weren't making any progress. They're doing what we call treading water.
Mm, okay.
So they're not making any progress. So when we came in and they weren't allowed to talk as much, they decided they didn't like it, but they hadn't made any changes. And so
Okay.
we want to help the women to actually move forward and not get stuck in that trauma. I do not believe that God meant for this type of a situation to be a life sentence. And yet the secular community would pretty much tell you, once a victim, always a victim, or, you're a
Mhm.
survivor now. But I don't see any place in the Bible that says, where God says, I've come that you might survive life.
Yeah.
You know, He says, I've come that you might have life and have it abundantly, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
and he calls us more than conquerors. So there's a point where a woman is a victim when she's experiencing abuse. She gets out of it, she's survived it, but we want to do more than survive. We want to overcome it. We want to be those overcomers or conquerors in those things. And that they would move on to other things. It doesn't have to be, it's a part of their story, but it's not who they are.
Yeah. So are
It
you
doesn't
having
define them.
women who are coming to you who are in the middle of it? Maybe they're still living in that abusive home.
Yeah.
And do you, because that brings up issues like, well, where do I go?
Yeah.
I leave. And do you provide services for that, or you have numbers they can call, or what?
Right. Well, that's a great question. So, we have women at all different phases, those who are right in the midst of it, those who have maybe separated, or there's a restraining or protection order in place. And then we have women have been out of it for years who attend. Those women, and you don't have to have experienced physical abuse. That's another thing. A lot of women feel like, well, I don't think I was really abused. He never hit me. Most abuse isn't physical.
Hmm.
So the great thing about coming to the Her Journey class is that when it, if and when it comes to the point where a woman has to leave, she's had time to work on it because we've been helping her to think it through. She's given a safety plan. We talk about safety planning so that, she's not like having to run and try to find a shelter. She's actually thought it through and got a plan together so that if she does choose to leave, she has somewhere to go because most shelters are turning away just as many women as are taking in.
Hmm.
So we connect in our area with all of the domestic violence organizations and shelters that are here. That's a whole nother job in and of itself. But
Yeah.
we also have resources to give in other states. Family justice centers are across the United States. They're like a one-stop shop for victims of abuse. So they have all the different partners in one place. And and there's you know all kinds of services out there. It just takes some work to find them, and I know that's hard. But we just give them the resources that we can. When we have women calling in from all over, I'll just start looking online while I'm talking with them, trying to find what's in their area to send them directly to go get the help that they need. So
Okay.
no one organization can do it all, Sue. No one. This is too big an issue.
Right.
Big, you
Yeah,
know.
that's what I want. And you have like counselors you recommend as well in that
We have a
area?
few on our website, and any counselor that will go through our training, we will then also put them on our website and to have people send them to, because we're asked from all over, and a lot of our counselors are more local to us, but some of them do virtual consulting or counseling as well. And the reality, I would want your listeners to know this, is that like less than 9% of counselors are trained in domestic violence. So they're trained in trauma informed care,
Mm.
but not in domestic violence. And I would tell them, before you go see the counselor, ask them how many hours of training in domestic violence have they received and from who. It should be from a domestic violence agency, and it should be at least 40 hours. Pastors, seminaries, and also social workers, they only get like 2 hours of training if they're lucky.
If that, yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel all those places, should move into where there's actually an entire class if you're going to be a social worker, a counselor, or a pastor, because you're going to be running into it because it's so prevalent.
Yeah, yeah. So it's obviously you're Christian based.
Hmm.
So people coming into it know that, right?
Yep. But that
And
we've had people of other faiths or no faith at all attend and love it.
yeah, but some from what you're sharing, you talk
Mhm.
a lot about God, true?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We
So
do, but it's just I've had women of no faith come to support a friend, and their friend didn't continue coming, but they came in going, "Oh my gosh, this is my life," and they stayed because it was so supportive and so encouraging. I had one woman whose daughters saw so much change in their mom, her teenage daughters, that they took turns coming with her every other week because they wanted to make sure she made it to class. And this is a person who wasn't a person of faith. It's just a safe place.
right.
We're not, trying to evangelize. We're just speaking God's truth and God's heart for them. And we also do intervention. So we work with men and women who use abusive behaviors, which is very unusual for a agency that does victim advocacy work to also be doing this work. But it's made us really good at our job. But most of our intervention clients, both men and women, aren't walking with God, don't necessarily have a relationship with God. We just require that they believe God exists and are okay with our approach.
Yeah.
And and most of them just again find the program extremely helpful. So it
So
we
I
don't.
assume, like, how about do you bring up in this about God's forgiveness and, like, therefore bringing up the cross, that kind of thing?
Well, we have a whole class called the F word. The F word is forgiveness.
Okay.
And we talk about what forgiveness isn't. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what forgiveness means because the church has so mishandled this issue of abuse that they often will just say you just need to forgive and it will all be better, and not realizing that they've just made it more unsafe for her to go back into this
Mm.
relationship. But she says she forgives because that feels like the right thing to do, but nothing has changed. And all of the responsibility for fixing this relationship was put on her instead of on the person doing the abuse. So, it's that's kind of where we come at this. So we're not into, oh, you just need to forgive him and it'll all be okay. We don't do that. We talk about the importance of your value, and because God created you as valuable, then it is right and appropriate to set boundaries, even separate yourself from that person. And if that person isn't willing to get the help they need, then it's even appropriate to end that marriage or end that relationship with that person, because God has not called us to die. And so he wants us to live life and live it abundantly, like I said. So it's really freeing for these women, and being somebody who was raised in the church, and understands how that looks and how that feels as a woman. I just have had so many women said, "You're the first person said I could actually leave." And we're not promoting divorce, but what we're saying is that God, there's a verse that says, where God says, "Yeah, I set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, therefore choose life." So we're asking the women to choose life, or we're setting it before them and saying, when I have women say, "Well, I just don't believe in divorce or whatever," I'm like, "Okay." So I said, "Are you okay with living the rest of your life this way?" And the answer is always no, of course. So I said, so then I just bring it back to them. What do you feel God is calling you to do? And so all we're doing is walking alongside them, not telling them what to do or not to do, but walking alongside them in their journey of healing. That's all we're doing.
Mhm.
And we're giving them a few ideas and some choices, but we're not telling them what to choose.
Okay.
So, and studies show out of Washington State, they did a study where they showed that women that got 12 hours of victim advocacy did not return to their abusive partners.
Mm.
So, and
Wow.
we give them more than that when classes are about an hour and a half long. And women who are right in the abuse sometimes aren't as consistent with coming. It's really hard to come to group because you have to come out of denial. And to survive the abuse, you have to go back into denial. And so they're not always as consistent with it, with attendance, but we just do it ongoing. So there's no sign up. They just come and go as they please. And it just makes it just super safe. Yeah.
So how many lessons?
There's 15 lessons that we just rotate through all year long, never
Okay, just
ending.
keep it going. So they
Yep.
pick up in number 13, then they'll
It
just
doesn't
start
matter.
over. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Doesn't matter because if you know anything about abuse, you know that when the women are reaching out for help, that's when you need to help them because within hours or days, the abuser is going to convince her to come back and he's going to do all the things that she's wanted him to do or say to control her back into a relationship. It's still controlling, it's just a different type of control. And
Right.
she wants to believe him. And of course we do, because nobody gets in a relationship to see it end. And
Right.
I can say women try so hard to save these relationships.
Yeah.
They go to all these seminars, they read all the self-help books on how to be a better wife, all these things. And if we could fix it that way, we would have already fixed it. It's not the victim's responsibility to fix the other person or to
Yeah.
fix themselves to fix the other person. The other person has to choose to get help. And a lot of times those people don't choose to get help until there's a crisis where she has said, we cannot be together. I'm going to separate. You got to go get some help. You got to make some progress. If you can make progress, then I want it to work, but if you're not going to make progress, then I can't continue in the relationship. So because abusers do not believe they're the problem, they believe that she's the problem.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's very messy, right?
it's very messy. Yeah,
So you've got these set classes, they come and go, but each person's got an individual mess. So you as a leader, how involved are you in their mess? Or are you just an hour and a half, you're just sharing a class and see you next week, guys?
you know,
I hope I'm
we
not being crass, but I don't know
no,
how to
no, I get
describe
it.
it.
I know that that makes it sound kind of negative, but at the same time, I have to say this: in doing this work, if you don't have clear boundaries, then you've got problems. I was told by the very first person I spoke to about doing this, she was a counselor. She goes, Stacey, you better have really good boundaries because this will consume you.
Yeah,
And a lot of our women are survivors, are women who've gone through abuse, went through our program,
right,
became leaders for us. So we have set really clear boundaries. This is what you're going to do, and here's are the things you are not going to do.
mm,
So
that's
you
good.
know, if we don't do that, we're going to burn our leaders out. And most of the leaders probably break the rules a little bit. And when they do, I
Yeah,
get calls from me going, Stacey, I did what you told me not to do, and now I have this problem. See, I've made all the mistakes.
yeah,
I've made all the mistakes. So this is why the policies got put in place. It's like our job is to walk alongside these women and lead this program, love on them, pray for them, and let them know that, it's not their fault and that they have value and we praise them every time they make a brave choice to make change in their life, to begin ending that cycle of abuse in their life. We would love to see every relationship make it, but we didn't control that. She doesn't control that. But the church really struggles with that because it means sometimes a divorce, or oftentimes a divorce. Now we do have men in our men's program who do very hard work, and she does her work, and they're able to reunite. And I have women, I have couples who are still together, 20 years later now. They're still together, and the guys will call me and say, "I just want you to know I'm still working the program, and we're doing good. It was a rough year, but we made it through, and I'm practicing all the tools that you gave me." Because
mm,
here in Oregon, men's domestic violence intervention is male female co-facilitated. So a man and a woman are both teaching that class.
okay,
So
okay,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
okay. My brain's kind of swirling with just thoughts, of helping people in this situation. And, it takes a lot of courage for people, doesn't it,
yeah.
to step out of those situations.
Even to make a phone call too, if it takes courage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm thinking you've got your class and then you have resources, and like you said, you encourage they get counseling,
Mhm.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The women have told us
that can
that
help.
I have some women have told us I've gone to 2 years of counseling and I got more out of one class than I did out of all the 2 years of
Yeah, I
counseling.
believe it. Yeah, that's good.
And just the support of knowing they're not alone in this is just so valuable for these women to be
Yeah.
affirmed for what they've gone through and how they're making change is really affirming.
So if you gave me the topics of these 15 sessions, would that help me understand better what the course is?
So, you know, possibly, it's loosely based on Psalms 23 that talks about the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Basically, that first class, what talks about, we're using that first verse that, I shall not lack. And what do we lack? We lack information, understanding around what abuse is. So that's where we do that piece of it,
Okay.
right? We
Okay.
talk about the difference between being alone and lonely and the
Mm,
importance of being a whole person so that you can be alone and be separate and be an individual and be whole. And that's when you're really in a healthy place to be in a relationship.
mm.
So I'm trying to think of all my other lessons that we teach. We do one on perfectionism and how that's something that some women get caught up into because they're trying to perform for acceptance and love from their partner.
Mhm.
And we talk about where your focus is at because if you're focusing on your abuser, then you're always going to be in a negative kind of like place because you can't fix him, you can't change him. We're not the fixers. We're only responsible for ourselves. We can only change ourselves. So we talk about our relationship between us and God because that's all we have control of. And so actually, I almost have to bring my book, even though I've done this like a zillion times. I've
I
taught this
know.
classes a zillion times. So I know that we do, our depression one, our um,
You must do
we
something
do
on their value, their
well,
own
all the
value.
classes we talk about our value. That's throughout the entire program. We talk about we do talk about anger, like I mentioned. That's a class. We have um, oh gosh,
You
why is my
you
mind
said
going blank?
forgiveness. Is there anything like about how to help your kids through this? Or, there's that whole element that goes on too.
Sure. We talk about that. In fact, our leaders, we're working on a module right now. They have to every year they do a 1 week module to recertify as a leader, and so we're working on uh, working with children who abuse, both minor children and adult children. So it is something that comes up. It is something we address, and a lot of the things that we teach can also work with children, although it's harder when it's your child because it's harder because while we'll set boundaries, we don't really want to follow through with a lot of consequences, especially when they're really serious consequences like calling the police on them or
Yeah.
having them leave the house because it's no longer safe for them to be in the house with you because they're abusing you.
Okay.
And I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I wish there was more services for children. On the West Coast, it is state law that children are taught about abuse and trafficking all the way through high school, which I think is great that they get some education on that. But I think that children who witness abuse, the effects are much greater than what people think. People think
Mhm.
that only when children are the direct victims of the abuse is it bad. But studies show the effects are exactly the same except for one thing. Children who are just witnessing the abuse have higher rates of mental health issues because it's a very powerless place to be.
Mm.
So we've been doing this long enough. We're getting the second generation through the door,
Yeah. Okay.
and we're seeing a lot more mental health issues than ever before. And I mean, there's a
Mhm.
lot of reasons for that.
Yeah.
But I know that definitely being in an abusive home, being raised in it's very cyclical. It's very, very much a learned behavior and a pattern that's played over and over again. And helping them to get out of that cycle is an important piece of that and realize again, over and over again, that because they're valuable, it is appropriate right to set boundaries and
Yeah.
to make choices to end that abuse. And
Yeah.
I think that's so important for these women to know, or for
I
men who have been
I
abused. Yeah.
I appreciate you talk about that. Actually, isn't what I meant, but I'm glad you brought that up. What I meant is, if the woman is experiencing abuse at the home, then, you know, the children are greatly impacted. You did mention that. But,
Right.
you know, do you talk about like, what boundaries in that and what's your responsibility for those kids? Because I find like one gal I'm trying to help, she's almost not willing to help herself. But when
Yeah.
I pointed out the impact it was having on her children, all of a sudden she's starting to move forward a little bit. Like, okay, I didn't really think about that, especially if um, he's like just taking it out of the mom. But even then, that impacts the
Yeah.
kids, and
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
often he that anger is coming out on them as well. You
Yes,
know.
absolutely. And so when the women join the group, they're given a packet, and in that packet, there's a two-sided sheet that has all the effects of abuse on children. So they get that up
Mm,
front. It's
okay,
there for
good.
them. They could go
Yeah,
through it. It comes up in group. The women ask sometimes, and that's when we kind of just have a little discussion about it. But we don't do a whole lesson on that because, children are pretty powerless. But if we can help a woman change, or even a man change his
right,
abusive
right.
behavior, then we can help in that cycle of abuse for the entire family.
Yeah,
And uh, so I think children, they do all kinds of things to help children who have been exposed to abuse. Talking about their feelings is really important. They also say that team sports are as effective as therapy
mm,
for
yeah,
children.
I believe that.
And so there's all these things we could do. And I've watched women who were abused be amazing mothers and show love and be able to not be resentful and be able to be present. His kids have grown up to be really wonderful, functioning adults,
That's
you
cool.
know.
Yeah,
But not every child is going to choose to be abusive or find themselves being a victim of abuse, but they're just more prone to it because it's what they were raised in.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, this is really awesome. Stacy, can you tell us how people can find out about your organization and
Hmm.
if they need to get involved or if they want to be a trainer, either way.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a website. It's abuserecovery.org. That's abuserecovery.org. Our phone number is on there. They just call us and contact us. We're Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 Pacific time. And we are here to support and listen, and if a group isn't what a woman needs when she calls in, if she needs shelter, then that's the most important thing. We're going to direct her and help her to find something out there. If she needs food, we're going to help her find some food pantries or something like that. We're sensitive to that. We're not here just to promote what we're doing. I mean, this is a free program, no cost.
Yeah,
That's what
wow.
we raise money for because a nonprofit is just a free thing. So we just want the women to be able to go. We want to remove any barrier that would keep her from coming.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you, Stacy. This is really, really wonderful. Yeah, really awesome resource. And I hope all of you listening, I can think of a couple people I could share this with. So, yeah, I hope that you guys it's kind of prompting your heart, or at least remember it, write it down somewhere so that when you meet somebody who's experiencing that, you can give them the website. All right. Thanks so much, Stacy, for joining us. Everybody, you have a great week, and we'll see you again next week.